interests getting their way for their interest at our sacrifice. That is why I'm running. I will never, ever, ever make a decision based on a special interest. I will always say what is best for the American people. And that's how I'll decide what the solution should be. And if that costs me campaign contributions, I don't care. I'm not raising that much money anyway, to be honest. I don't need that much money. I don't want that money. And just to go a little sideways on you, I was offered, and I'm not going to throw any name under the bus, but early in my campaign, I was offered the potential for some money if I put a couple of people on my staff from that person, interest. I said, no way. And yeah, I lost money. And maybe I lost a lot of money because it could have been the kind of the dike, you know, the dike in the dam, or just it would have let a lot of money in. And that was a principle of mine that I will not take money in reference to a favor. No way, no how. And the same thing, I will never decide a bill on what's best for an interest. I'll always think about what's best for the American people, constituents in CD3, and go from there. So let me make that right clear up front. And I would never think about doing anything different than that.
Well, I think too with the media now, it's like, you know, all everybody hears is we're greedy. We have 2%. We use all this gas and so on. And the media, we're butting our heads against the wall because of the media. And voices like yours just don't get out there. People don't hear them. It's like we have to. I mean, how do you conquer that?
Well, you elect me.
Yeah.
That's a start. And that whole thing, 2%, I've heard 4%, just for integrity's sake. I've heard 4% of the oil resources, we use 25%. So what? How much do we give to this world? That's a completely unfair comparison. Like, you know, some other country that has an equivalent amount of population should use the equivalent amount of energy. You know, our economy is at 15 trillion, give or take. The next economy, number 2, China. China's coming up fast. Worried about China overtaking us? They're at 1.5 trillion. 10 times the amount. So we use a lot of energy because we produce a lot and the world benefits. That's a good distribution of resources when you talk about the return on your investment. Okay, so that whole idea of 4% population versus 25% energy really is unfair. But the energy issue itself, there are so many smart things to do. I mean, you talk about drilling. You know, you hear President Obama blaming President Bush for all these problems, right? Well, our Congressman Garamendi was out there touting how we're drilling more and producing more oil than ever before. And in the debate, I got to stand up and say, yeah, blame Bush for that. You want to blame Bush for everything else, blame him for that. Because it takes a few years from the signing of a lease to the drilling of the oil, to the production of the oil, and it's not 3 years or less. Wait 3 or 4 years from now because the president and his administration is denying these leases how much oil we're going to be producing in his second term, if that's what happens. Blame Bush for that. There is lots of ways to solve our energy issue that's America first, American first, and drilling is a part of it. We should not be afraid of drilling for environmental reasons. We should not be afraid of natural gas, using that as a what I call bridge energy source between oil and what comes next. Now, I'm not a real big global warming, people-caused, I should say, global warming fan. Our globe has gone hot and cold and all kinds of stuff in between. And to think that people are the cause of such a thing, I just don't see it in the science. And I'm a numbers science guy, and we could go over that if we want to tonight. However, I have the same goal as somebody who is concerned about global warming and who does think that people cause it. Well, if you go back through human history, when we have evolved our energy source, when we went from solar, back when all it was the sun that we had, to wood with fire, then we went to coal, then we went to oil, this lifestyle, the living standard of human beings skyrocketed every time we evolved our energy source. I am looking forward to the next form of energy that is clean, simple, abundant, and cheap. Because you and I will benefit so greatly. But the way to get there, so now we have that same goal, but the way to get there is by having a vibrant economy that has the money to put into R&D, research and development, and the infrastructure it takes to get there. And the way you have a vibrant economy is not through cap and trade, not through reducing our, our ability to produce, but by cheap energy, cheap oil now. And the way you get cheap oil is by drilling and removing all that regulation. The Keystone Pipeline is another great issue of the differences between what I see as somebody who's common sense and the way the government is now. The message was no to the Keystone. You even had pipe fitter unions come out against the president because they're like, those are our jobs. What do you mean, no? The message should have been, and there was some legitimate concerns about some water supplies in Nebraska, if there was an oil leak there, that we had to talk about, that we had to think about. But the message should be, absolutely yes, we're going to build that pipeline. Absolutely yes, we're going to increase the supply of oil through this country. Absolutely yes, we're going to work with our Canadian partners to make this possible. And we're going to work on these few details because in America, we say, yes, we can. Geez, we heard that for how long leading up to the election. I should have heard that out of my president. Yes, we can. To this pipeline. Right. And so that should have been the message and we figured it out. But instead we got something else. So there is a lot of solutions in terms of building American energy, less foreign dependence on oil. You know, at $4 a gallon, we're sending anywhere from $500 to $700 billion overseas to foreign oil producers. Your money going to build their countries that we could bring home if we wanted to. Now let me expand on that a little bit more. I do think natural gas is something that we can use in our cars, in our electrical plants, a lot more than oil. I think it's something we should bridge to, but it's not the final solution. I do think there is energy solutions out there like hydrogen that we're moving towards, like some cosmic electric things, nanotube batteries or carbon nanotube batteries. This is a crazy thing. I just want you to think about this for a second. It sounds crazy to me. I'll be the first to admit. But you have something made out of carbon nanotubes that holds a charge. It is charged by a lightning bolt, and it's better than any car battery you've ever heard of. Could run your electric car for a long time based on just better technology. Is that science fiction? Maybe. Maybe that's just a hopeful idea. But those are the kind of things that are waiting for us in the future that we can get to if we have the vibrant economy to invest in them. I think nuclear power today is one of those 21st century energy sources that's clean, abundant, cheap, once you put the money in to build it, that we could do. We have 104 nuclear power plants in America that have been cooking for over 30 years without a problem. And they're second generation plants, old technology. China's building nuclear power plants all the time. You have Europe, not that I want to follow Europe on hardly anything, but this is one area that's, France is over 70%, Holland 90%, I believe are the numbers. Many of these countries are much more reliant on nuclear power for their electricity than we are. We're at 20%. Third generation nuclear power plants, much more efficient, much more stable, safer, and the wasted nuclear fuel from third generation power plants is the fuel source for fourth generation power plants. So by the time you get 100 years from now burning through all that fuel, and again, this is from science articles that I've read, the science behind it is just incredible. Third generation is real, fourth generation is real. We haven't built fourth generation yet because we haven't had the spent fuel from third generation. But you have all these possibilities for the future if we just look to that. When you try to dump all these billions of dollars into things like solar and wind and algae and all these unproven technologies, I think that some of them are great. I'm driving here today, I saw those big windmills. I talked to the windmill manufacturers who tell me that you can earn your money back on wind 6 or 7 years. That's good. But it's a small percentage. It's not the answer. We need real answers to these problems, and drilling, natural gas, nuclear, all these are real answers today that we can invest in and see the future. I would love to see us be 40% reliant on nuclear in 10 years. up to 80% reliant on nuclear in 20 years. And so electricity is cheap. And maybe we are driving electric cars with those cool nanotube batteries or something. You know, the future is bright. Oh, I am so hopeful and so excited about our future. And technology is part of that hope because of all the things that we're doing. But we got to do it smart. And we can't have agendas, political, misguided agendas behind this push. We've got to do common sense, right? And conservative. And also, let's throw in the Constitution for good measure. Solutions for the future, and not, not things to just make people feel good. Sir, in the back.
How do you rein in the various government agencies, like here in California, we have CARB, EPA. We now have a new one, the Office of Financial Research, that's been given through the Frank Dodd financial bill, unlimited ability to tax financial institutions. And the last time I read the Constitution, only Congress can raise taxes.
Yeah. Okay, you ready? As your congressman, I will outlaw CARB. Just kidding.
How about
Come on, there was no applause there?
no, still the EPA.
Yeah. Well, CARB is a state issue that I will leave to Californians and California State
The federal government has plenty of them.
Right. You talk about EPA. You talk about some of this Frank. I didn't know about the Frank Dodd thing. We'll have to look that up. Let me know more about it. But absolutely, you have just regulations going amok. You have regulators that have no concept of the consequences of the interpretations that they're instituting as force of law on the economy, on businesses, on job creators, on just American citizens. You have to have a lot more accountability through that progress. I am absolutely for abolishing the EPA, just like Newt Gingrich says, firing all those people that have their only experience is writing regulations and never trying to live under those regulations, and replacing it with something that's called the Environmental Solutions Agency that will put together regulations to try to make sure our environment is safe, to make sure our working environment is safe. And a good example for a philosophy going into it, talking to an Exxon engineer, he says that the EPA has a regulation restricting the amount of heavy metals in Exxon's wastewater into open water sources. Excellent. I don't want mercury and lead and whatever else is just running off into the rivers and doing horrible things to the environment, the fish and the food source and all the negative consequences. Wonderful. Let's do that. That sounds like something we should do. However, the EPA goes ahead and tells Exxon exactly how to remove the metals in a very inefficient and expensive way. And so it ties their hands on how to comply with that regulation. And the engineer said, just give me the limit and I'll meet it. I'll do it efficiently. I'll do it as cheaply as possible. And companies will benefit. That's how we move forward in regulations. Give limits, let companies figure it out, make sure they're complying. And if not, then we take steps to make sure they comply. But telling companies what to do and how to meet these regulations is the wrong way to go about it. We have got to do some wholesale change in the way federal government does business, telling American citizens, American business, how to run their lives instead of just being the official, just being the rules setter, instead of being the actual engaged person telling you what to do. We've got to change that philosophy.
Now, there are thoughts on the 10th Amendment. The federal government obviously has too much power. How are you going to evolve the federal government back down to the states? Do you have any thoughts?
Excellent questions. 10th Amendment, I would imagine you're speaking about the 30 enumerated powers in the Constitution, and then the 10th Amendment comes along and says, if the enumerated power, where's the effect, is not contained within this document, then that power or authority is at the state level or the individual. I heard an excellent kind of thought on that. States' rights, it's not about states' rights, it's about authority and what they're allowed to do. And if it's not in the Constitution, it's below the federal level. Let me pull this out here.
How about getting rid of the Fed and the Department of Energy?
Department of Energy, Fed.
And Fed.
Hang on with those questions. This is, hey, check the flag. Thanks, buddy. I hope this is in every kid's textbook within 10 years. It's what I call the freedom curve, something I developed. Because being a math guy, being a guy who understands that not everybody thinks in numbers like I do. I tried to come up with something that made sense as a picture that said 1,000 words. And over here on this side of the graph, you have freedom. The higher you go, the more freedom you have. On this bottom side of the graph, the further right you go, the bigger your government is. Now, if you have no government, you have no freedom. It's chaos, anarchy, tyranny of the strong. You need to grow some government to protect your rights, to order society, to make sure you have freedom to live in your community. Now, right about here, you have the most amount of freedom for the least amount of government. And I believe that's what our Constitution did. 5,000 years of human history, they figured it out. This is what we're going to do. And when we live in this area of the curve, at the top of the curve, we have the most amount of freedom, least amount of government. That is what made America great. That has provided the opportunity, the prosperity, the ability for Americans to go out and succeed. Now, as you continue to grow government, your freedoms start to fade. And down here, you got places like China and Venezuela and Cuba. A lot of government, no freedom. And they're not doing so hot, right? Well, China, because of the capitalistic influences are helping on it. But anyways, you come up here and you're talking about Europe, the socialized democracies of Europe. A lot of government, a lot of taxes, not as much freedom. And I've traveled the world, and Europe's a wonderful place. I love Germany. I love Spain. I love England. I love a lot of those countries over there that I've been to. They're neat. But there is not the same sense of hope. There is not the same sense of dreaming, the same sense of anticipation for a wonderful future that we have here in America. Now, unfortunately, I see our country somewhere here on the curve, going the wrong direction. Growing government and losing freedom. Here's a promise I'll give you in response to your 10th Amendment question. And I'll give you very few promises, because if I give you one, I'm going to keep it. There will never be a bill that I write or vote for that takes us further down the wrong direction on this curve. Every bill I look at, I will look at through this filter. And if it's growing government and taking your freedom, I am not going to vote for it. And I'll tell you very clearly, grew government, took your freedom, not what I'm about. Anything I write or vote for is going to be taking us back to the top where America belongs. This is my goal, and this is what I'll be working towards. So you can take that to the bank, if you will. That's how I'll be your congressman. And the 10th Amendment is a good guide to look at that. And we have to eat this elephant one bite at a time, to use a Republican analogy. And we can't change it all overnight. When you talk about the Fed or the Department of Energy, did you mention? Ma'am?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You're reading the Constitution. I'm terribly sorry to bother you.
My question
The
was.
Fed and the Department of Energy?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
They're
And
both.
when you talk about some of those things, we got to look at how to get ourselves back up there. So that's how I'll look at it. Now, the Fed itself, Ron Paul has sponsored a bill for I don't know how many years now, I think since 1983, about auditing the Fed. I'm signing on. My name's going to be on that bill. Let's find out what the Fed does. How in 2008, when our economy is the most destitute it's been, is the Fed making record profits, 75 billion or 60, some crazy number in the high 60s, 70s, the billions of dollars the Fed made. While we're all suffering in the worst recession in who knows how long.
Well, aren't they printing money faster than to hold off what's the inevitable?
Quantitative easing, which is going to inevitably end up in inflation and stealing our standard of living, stealing our American dream. That's why we have to balance our budget. So, well, let's take a look at the Fed. Let's get it out there. Let's make it accountable to the public and see what's underneath the veil. Department of Energy, the Department of Education, those are two places that maybe good intentions when they were put together, but what has been the results?
Nothing.
$4 a gallon of gas, 70% reliant on foreign oil, and that thing's been around for 30 plus years. Department of Education, now again, No Child Left Behind, something that was perhaps good intention, but the practicality of it, when you have teachers just teaching the test because that's what they're instructed to do and how they need to get their students through, The way it's worked out has not worked. The best thing I can do for you as a congressman is help repeal that No Child Left Behind. And then I would like to kick K-12 education down to the states and get out of it altogether. Again, it's not anti-education to want to get rid of the Department of Education. It is spending your tax dollars wisely and recognizing that this entity that has been sucking billions of your dollars away and providing nothing in return has run its course and is no longer viable. Get rid of it. Get the education down and let teachers teach and children learn. And I think that's a much better way to deal with it. Yeah. Let me get some new people. You, sir.
Yeah, going back to the map of the, this district.
Yeah.
How much of the district is in, that you ran in last time, how much of the district is that part?
Yeah, the only overlap is Vacaville.
Pardon?
The only overlap between District 7 against George Miller and District 3 against John Garamendi is Vacaville. But you bring up a good point that I want to expound upon a little, my fellow Solano County residents, is that this new district, wonderful as it is, and I feel a lot more at home up in the farm country, growing up in a one-stop sign town in Wisconsin, you know, working in horse stalls and haying, doing all that stuff. Feel much more comfortable here, but the bulk of the votes in this district are in Solano County. We're talking 126,000 voters in Solano. Your next county is Yolo at 79,000, and then you're down into the high teens, 18,000, 20,000, and even down to 7,000 voters in Colusa County, not very many. So Solano County is the anchor to this district, and it is my humble belief that whoever wins Solano will win in June, but even more importantly, will win in November, because you have a lot of good Republican voters up north that will counteract the more liberal voters in Yolo and Lake, perhaps. I see this kind of breaking even between those areas, and now you're left with Solano as making being the decider.
How much of Sacramento County is?
Very little. It's Walnut Grove, Ileton, and Rio Linda, less than 20,000 votes. Not much at all. So when you look at the map and you see Solano County's place in it, having a native Solano Countyan run helps. Having somebody who's run in Solano County before helps. Somebody who has invested 17 years of their life, their family's life, in the communities of Vacaville and Fairfield, even down in Sassoon with some vet stuff, helps. So again, why we are so optimistic about the future. Sir.
Maybe over here we're trying to answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're hiding.
Long time.
What do you got?
Well, I wanted to go back to the Obamacare
Sure.
thing. When I saw my doctor about 2 months ago, she said that I have to have a procedure done before I'm 75. In June, I'm 75. And
You look
she said,
great.
and she said,
I said, you look great.
Well, thank
No
you.
way I'd say you're 74.
but anyway, and I said to her, oh, why? Did Obamacare kick in already in Kaiser? And she said no comment. And
It
so
has.
it's already starting in
It has.
Kaiser.
Yeah, you know, and this is the thing. I mean, I do not have the source on this, and as your congressman, well, I'm just going to repeal it, period.
Yes.
But we've got to get in there and dig in there and not ever let something like that happen in the future.
Well,
but
it's-
the whole idea of government takeover gives you this fear because you know that it's possible. You know, and when you're being advised of these things, it's good advice.
It's
So,
really, it's scary.
And my friend's Kaiser doctor admitted it.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's very tough. I'll give you one story, a very personal story that I don't tell very often, but it's important. My wife, Christine, wonderful, beautiful wife, she had something going on that we still don't know exactly what it was. And she had to go to the emergency room and be treated for whatever. So we ended up, the best thing we could figure out is something with her blood was out of whack. The chemistry of her blood was just out of whack and really having a hard time. And so in the emergency room, they started giving her an IV fluid with electrolytes and whatever else was in it. And she was responding, but not enough. And they kept giving her bottle after bottle after bottle. And she ended up taking 22 bottles of this fluid. And finally, thank God, she stabilized and was okay. And, you know, your story about 70 or 75, I want you to bring it home to a 40, well, 29 and holding.
Oh, nose is getting longer.
A 42-year-old, at the time, 42-year-old woman, mother of 3 teenagers, wife of a Air Force, officer, United pilot, a viable human being by any stretch. Not that 70 or 75 isn't viable. I don't want you to think that I'm not saying that. But in the context of what they're trying to say, well, you run your course, let's let you go because we can't afford you. Here is a woman in her prime contributing to society at every level possible. And the doctor came in, and when you're running for Congress, you hear about this stuff all the time. The doctor came in, and this is from him, said, I hear your husband's running for Congress. Yes. Well, I just want you to know my understanding of Obamacare is I would have had to cut you off at 20 bottles, and you would be dead. So we're not even talking about the supposed idea of
70.
elderly. We're talking about actually managed care.
All the way
And again, I don't know if that is the absolute truth of the implications of Obamacare. However, we've heard enough to where those stories make sense and are possible because of the restrictions being placed out there. And that was this doctor's understanding. So even if Obamacare wasn't doing that, which again, I don't know for sure, but if that was in that doctor's mind and he's got to stand there at 20 bottles and say, sorry, dear God, I'm a widower and my children are without a mother. And that's bringing it home.
Yes.
That's bringing it home.
Really?
So, yeah, repeal Obamacare. Jan.
Can we use that same thing on Obama, say you've run your course, we can't afford you?
There is an election, November 4th.
I mean, we can use his own words.
There is an election. Sir.
Okay, the economy is what drives jobs,
Absolutely.
okay? In your district, for all of California, unemployment is just sucking us dry.
12% officially, somewhere north of 22%.
26 Calusa, 18 Gildo,
Yeah,
11 Solano, that's today's figure,
sure.
okay?
Horrible, unacceptable.
So, to get those jobs, businesses need to grow. How can we kickstart business?
Get right. Okay, as soon as I get in, and with Republican Congress, hopefully a Republican Senate, hopefully a Republican President, with the choices we have before us. First thing we do, repeal Obamacare, get that off the plate so they understand. Businesses, job creators understand that we're serious about this. Next thing, start a Grace Commission. Start something that says this is going to be a regulatory reform department. We are going to be reducing the burden of regulations on job creators starting today. And then I, as your congressman, would be right away saying, I'm writing a bill that says you cannot sue for a non-compliance to the ADA. And then I would do a little bit of homework and try to add as many other regulations as I could find to that bill in a very quick manner. And say personal injury lawsuits are not allowed to force compliance with government regulations. It's not a personal injury when the mirror is 2 inches too high, or the aisleway is 2 inches too narrow. It's not a personal injury. That's another way. And so, just like what happened in 1981, when government got serious about getting off the backs of job creators, and it took less than 3 years for that economy to turn around, you start seeing that again. Now let's bring it home a little bit. I talked to folks up in Glenn County, and there was a fella up there that tried to get a rice straw fiberboard manufacturing plant up there. And because of the myriad of regulations and all the other things, the fella actually died, and his family is trying to continue doing it while waiting for it. I'm your congressman. I'm coming down and I'm trying to find the exact hurdles in the way of building that rice straw fiberboard manufacturing plant, and I'm working to bring that plant to our district. And why don't we do that? Why isn't that happening now? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Go ahead.
To follow up I missed your discussion with Garamendi, but he asked, how do you cut spending? You know, in our household, we cut 10%. If 10% doesn't cut it, we cut 15. If 15 across the board. If it doesn't work, you cut again.
Yeah, and that's the deal, right? Whether it's our family budget, which we all have, our small business budgets, or my military budgets, which I've balanced several of those. I have a nearly $20 million military budget under my authority right now that I balance every year. And it's easy. You prioritize your spending. What's most important, what's least important, and everywhere in between. You stretch every dollar as far as it'll go. You come up with ways of making those dollars buy more things. And then you draw a line and say, no, I'm not spending money on that. And we can do that in federal government, just like we do in the other budgets that we run. Absolutely. But it's going to take you, the voter, to vote in somebody like me that's willing to say no. Now I'm going to give you another high-minded idea here. My vision for the future. The last great generation we had in this country was the World War II generation that sacrificed mightily to win that war, and we have been enjoying the blessings of their sacrifice ever since. Well, it is our turn now, ladies and gentlemen. It is our turn now to be the next great generation, to do what it takes to make sure that this American dream is there for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And our war, our sacrifice, is easy compared to theirs. What we need to give up is some of our reliance on the federal government. And we need to put forward a budget that has that shared sacrifice across all economic classes. And I'm not talking about raising taxes, but I am talking about giving up loopholes. But it's a shared sacrifice that we as a national movement, as Americans together, come together and make the sacrifices necessary. And we wear our sacrifices a badge of honor like they did back then. So what did you give up to make sure the American dream was there for our kids? And that's what we have to do. If we do this serially, oh, we're going to cut spending in the military. We're going to cut spending in social services, or whatever we're cutting spending in, and we do it piecemeal, it's a bunch of victims that everybody comes and supports to try to stop that cutting. We got to do it all as one, and that's what I talk about. The Rick Tubbs budget will do that. And we do it as a national movement that we have pride in. What did you do to make sure the American dream was there for our kids and grandkids? And now, those political battles, you know, you said, how am I going to do it as a freshman? That's another big idea that I'm coming towards. I'm not going as some just guy that wants to get along and hopefully get a retirement out of my federal government. I'm going there to change the world. I'm going there to make things better for our country, for our kids, for our district, for all Americans. And I'm willing to do the big things to get there. And balancing our budget is a huge thing. You know, every time you talk about cutting spending, oh, you're horrible, throw Granny off the cliff. It's necessary, but we have to talk about it in positive terms with the positive consequences and referencing the negative consequences of not doing it. And it has to be smart, common sense. Thank you. Yes, sir.
You know, the spending that we have, the goofy spending, the frivolous spending, and Darren mentioned, and he said, well, how are you going to cut spending? And he said, 1.2 million a year. Are there any examples ever? We hear these earmarks for the last 40 years. I mean, goofy things, hundreds of thousands of dollars going for different programs. The study of, you know, the honeybees in Idaho. Has there ever been anything, any example where that spending was cut out?
You know,
is there anything that's ever been stopped? I mean, I always talk about, yeah, we spend this way, and then everybody goes, yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Is there any?
Under the Republican Congress in 2010, earmarks have been dialed back significantly.
Well, they have.
They have. Not completely, and there's some debate about it.
Never completely.
Right. You don't hear a lot of things. You know, the Republican Congress has repealed cap and trade, repealed Obamacare, repealed, I don't know about that, I take that back. But they've done a lot of this stuff, and it's sitting in the Senate just waiting. And there's a lot of that. Earmarks have been dialed back, and they need to be dialed back even more. I'll talk about earmarks just a little bit. Use your question to talk about it. You know, when you talk, there's the most egregious earmark ever by Senator Tom Harkin in Iowa was this 1.7 or $2.7 million study of pig odor.
Yeah, that's right.
You remember that one? Did you hear about that? I mean, give pork, right? Come on, I mean, that's like a joke. But it's $2 million of your money. Well, it's just a minute of borrowing, right? Remember my original stat? It's only a minute of borrowing. Well, throw it in there. Baloney, that's
Is that money given, like, okay, the 1.2 million, whatever, is that money given to them right away and it's gone? It can't be, it's not given like a monthly payment?
I don't know. I tell you the truth, I don't know.
So I mean, it's just gone, so they give it to everybody last time, says, God, it's crazy, but it's gone.
But I do know, let me kick that into a different idea. You know, we had this incredible outcry of, you know, when we bailed out the banks and all of a sudden they're giving all these big bonuses to their executives. And it's our tax dollars that are going for their bonuses. And we're all, oh, that shouldn't happen. But there's nothing we can do about it because we gave them the money. You know, if we're using, back to me being your representative, you trusting me with your money to spend it wisely. If we're putting out tax dollars for something, there's strings attached. It's going to be spent the way it's intended. And if you're not spending it the way it was intended, it's being pulled.
How does that work? How does the pig owner situation, you know, come back up? How does he present it? Do people vote on it? And people sit there and go, oh, yeah.
No, there's a bill, whatever bill it was attached to.
How does that money get there?
Yeah, it's an appropriation. First there's an appropriation, and it's, and this is where you learn in the federal, like, I've never held elected office before, but I've worked in the federal government and the military. You know, first it's you know, authorized, appropriated. There's two steps. There's one step where Congress says we can spend the money. And then there's the next step where they actually put dollars against it. They can say we can spend the money all you want, but until they authorize the money, give the money and load it, we call it in the military, until they load the dollars against that appropriation, you can't spend it. So now it's loaded, and now it's been or authorized, and now they write the check. There goes your tax dollars. Okay, as a squadron commander, they load money into my budget, and I spend it. I spend it on flying, I spend it on salary, I spend it on pens and paper and toner. They give me money, it's under my authority, and I spend it. Now I am held accountable, I can only spend it according to certain rules. Now if I try to spend it outside those rules, like the one colonel I worked for out in Hawaii, he was spending outside the rules and I had to rein him in and figure that out. I can be fired, I can be thrown in jail, all kinds of bad things can happen to me. But it's too late, I spent it, right? Because it was given to me. So that's how it works. So when you get this...
But then who are those people that, when they ask for that, I mean, when that's presented, that to me is just almost like Saturday Live or something. Like we're going to give $1.2 million for the study of big organizations say, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't they stop that? They don't seem to.
Who is they? They is your
Who is
Congress.
they?
It's your Congress.
Well, that's it. So now what can you do as an individual?
Well,
you
and
stand
that's...
up and hold your nose and say, no big order for me.
Right, and you bring it out. You know, I mean, they've done a good job of dialing back earmarks. They being the Republican Congress that's there right now, it's got to be further. It's got to be taken further. And when you look, and I'm going to have this on my website. I'm going to have all the bills that I vote on, the bill, what it's about, and it'll be a yes, no, I don't know. And then it'll be yes because of, no because of, and you will find bills in there, I would guess to say, that I'm voting no, even though it's the Defense Authorization Act for my military to defend this country. There is this pork in there that needs to be removed. So my vote is no, and I'm going to bring it back into the House floor, and we're going to pull that pork out of there, and then we're going to pass the clean bill. So,
Yes.
so you may see that in the future in my website. Yes.
Okay.
We got a few more minutes, so if there's anybody out there that hasn't asked the question, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call you, but I'm going to let Barb go.
Okay, I just want to say, going back to the Obama health care passed because, first of all, nobody read the bill. They passed it in the middle of the night through all this little finagling.
Shenanigans.
That is wrong. That is so wrong. They found a way to do it, and it wasn't right. And bills aren't being read. They're just being passed. You know, and on top of it, the second point is the people in Congress don't have to live amongst like Obamacare like we do. They don't, you people, I don't mean you, those people don't have to live in the real world like we do. why don't they live under the same rules as we do?
Yeah, I've heard this.
And because of the insider trading thing, I worked in a law firm.
Yeah.
I had all sorts of inside information. You know what would happen to me if I did that?
Jail.
I'd have been in prison.
Right next to
And
Park
yet,
Center.
they can do it. They go vote on something and go out and buy stock.
When I heard the
That's
insider
crazy.
trading.
I mean, they
yeah.
stopped it. But if that's one thing, it's like seeing a cockroach. When you know there's one, there's 10,000 more right behind it. And you know how often those people are getting away with this? And they're messing with us.
You missed something about that healthcare. Inside also was hidden the fact that if you don't pay your property tax exactly on time, they can come in and take your checking account and take your money.
Yes, they got your check out.
In the healthcare bill.
Besides, when you sell your house, 3% goes into Obamacare.
And I think our next
That's
policy, they
nuts.
wanted 1%.
I heard something called the 28th Amendment, and it's any law passed applies equally to the members that passed it. And I don't know if we need a constitutional amendment for that, but it certainly is something that I would definitely make sure happen. And you might see a bill that says, no, Rick Tubbs voted no, or will vote no, and the explanation will be because it doesn't apply to me. Dear God, that's crazy. I couldn't believe the insider trading thing. I thought that, I didn't
that's
believe that was true, but it was. So, I mean, that would be something very easily done as a congressional
But reading
person.
the bills, how can you get people to read the bills before they're passed? That's nuts.
Well, don't write a 2,200 or
No.
2,700
But I
page
don't care if
bill.
it's 3 pages.
Yeah.
And those things, read them.
And you'll see on my website, I don't know, because I haven't read it yet. You know,
It should be against the law to have them vote before they read it.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, why not just put in a bill that says it has to be read on the House floor?
Well,
Read the whole
people aren't going to sit there and listen to that. I mean, I like what
No,
you're saying.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that gets rid of 2,200 pages down
Right,
to 2.
right.
I heard it was 26.
And I'll tell you another thing that I wouldn't agree
That's
to that is
right.
I don't need to read, I didn't need to read 2,700 pages of Obamacare to get to my answer of no, right? I didn't have to read the whole thing to say, no. So that's.
No, you don't have to listen, but it has to be read.
Yeah, I
And
appreciate
it will slow up government.
Yeah, that's good.
And
I
maybe
appreciate the
it's
idea behind that.
Isn't that why these people have aides and stuff? Aren't your helpers reading all this stuff and advising all these congressmen?
Sure, and there's some of that, but if you're gonna vote on a bill, you better know, you better not be surprised to like, hey, did you know there's a 2.3% property tax for high-end homes? It's not for $100,000 homes like ours, but, well, mine's a little more, but just to be honest, 3.
That's before the house. But remember, our houses aren't worth
Yeah,
very much anymore.
but the idea is I better not be surprised about a 2.3% property tax in Obamacare when I voted yes for it, kind of thing. I better understand the major and even the minor principles behind the bill. I may not have it memorized, I may not have every note and tittle memorized, but I better understand the implications, second, third, fourth order consequences, things that our folks just are not thinking through because they're not going through the bill and understanding it. To have a 2,700-page bill is just ridiculous.
Isn't our Medicare doubling next year anyway?
I don't know about that. Let me let you ask a question back there.
Finally, huh? I'm just curious, do you ever see a time when the cost of healthcare will come down? With the government out of it?
You know, I think
And,
so.
it just kept going up anyway.
If you do the smart things, I mean, why does it cost $50,000 for a liver transplant in one hospital that does a great job and $250,000 in another? Let's find that out. We call it standard operating procedures in the flying world. It means if you have an emergency, or even if you're just flying a normal flight, there are standard operating procedures that we follow. I fly with a different pilot just about every week with United Airlines, a different captain. Some of them I've flown with before, some, I don't know who I'm flying with tomorrow. But I know that when I get into that cockpit, we're going to do things the same way as I did with the last guy because of these SOPs, and it works.
Yeah. A year and a half ago, I went into emergency. And of course, I was there for 6 hours because it's emergency. But I had 10 minutes at the doctor's time, and I had an x-ray, and the bill was $3,000.
Yeah. Why?
And $2,000 of that was the x-ray.
Right. And there's a right. You know, and did you have insurance?
Okay.
Did you have insurance?
No,
You didn't?
no insurance.
See, that's what I got back to my previous point about you should be paying the same as Kaiser for that. And I bet you any money, Kaiser doesn't pay $2,000 for insurance. Why? when you walk into or you don't, when you walk into a grocery store, maybe you have insurance to cover your milk. $3 gallon of milk. Nope, you don't have insurance to cover that. $25 for that gallon of milk. No, we pay the same. Why is it not that way? Because they're trying to make up for uninsured and all this stuff. Do some smart things so that I think, well, technology is going to bring the cost down as we explore those ways. A lot of that will come down. But also as we implement some of these smart things and get rid of the waste, get rid of the overlap. One of the things talked about is these electronic records. That's a great way of making things a lot easier. My Air Force medical record, and I'm healthy, is like that big. And you can put that all on, the digital. And yes, I do see it come down, especially as you go forward, thinking about inflation and things like that. I mean, it can be cheaper, it will be cheaper if we take the steps necessary. It is not a foregone conclusion that this country will go bankrupt because of Medicare and Medicaid. So, and I think so. Yes, ma'am.
To answer your question, I just retired from medical billing for a doctor's office. And I was just in the emergency room, and I have insurance. And the bill was over $5,000. And all my insurance paid was $500 and something, and I had to pay a $20 co-payment. Now, my daughter has no insurance, and she's out of work. She went to the emergency room, and her bill is almost $10,000. She's got the hospital calling her constantly wanting the money. Now, is that fair?
No, and getting back to that idea, why are we charging uninsured more than insured? Uninsured could pay their bills if they were paying $500 instead of $5,000.
Well, it's the same thing. I worked in the doctor's office and I did medical billing, okay? And now most of the doctors are on these HMOs. And the HMOs only pay the doctors like between $10 and $20 a month for each patient. Now, it's almost like Obamacare because if the doctor sees that patient more than twice a year, he's not getting any money. These doctors are suffering. Right now, people think that doctors are rich. They're not rich.
Are you talking about Kaiser doctors?
No, I'm talking about regular MDs. I work in a regular office.
Okay. Yeah,
And they're not making very much money, believe me, because I got a high salary for the work I did. But my doctor could barely make payments on his office, on his staff, on his insurance. Now, if Obamacare is going to come into that, there's going to be a lot of doctors quitting because my doctor is already talking about quitting, and he's only in his 30s.
Yeah, and that's the future that's grim. And that's why we got to make changes now so that future is not grim. I remember, I don't know how many years ago this was, sitting on a ski lift with a doctor stuck, It's like, oh man, and I don't ski very often, so I'm enjoying the view. And I'm sitting next to a doctor who was just telling me malpractice is killing him. And he's going to retire early because he can't afford the malpractice insurance. You know that? And this is, like I said, a long time ago when I was starting to think about some of these problems and solutions and why I am so adamant about tort reform. So anyways, yeah, exactly. So, well, I'm going to finish up because it is hot, and I'll answer a couple more questions. Let me give my final spiel, and if you want to get up and grab a cookie and a water, I will, and I'll answer your 2 questions. But if you like what you have heard tonight, if you think I am the guy that you want representing you, then first of all, please vote. Please vote for me in June. Got to make it through the primary? Vote for me in November. If you can, I need your help. Volunteers are what are making this campaign work. It is the volunteers. Ask some of the folks that helped me get ready for this. Jan, Caroline, absolutely. Yes, thank you very much. We are running a pretty cheap campaign because we got a lot of volunteers doing a lot of work for us. And it's working. And as a fiscal conservative, that's the way I want to do it. But volunteers, whether it's walking door to door, getting great exercise, you see I'm tanned a little bit. It's not from the tanning bed, it's because I'm out there walking in the sun. It's beautiful. If walking's not your thing, I can use people phone calling. And I'm not asking you to sell. I'm not asking you to win votes for me. I'm simply asking you to invite people to town hall so they can hear me speak. And it's very easy, 30-second phone calls, nice walks, no knocking, just delivering flyers. Very easy. Now, if you can, social media, if you got any email, Facebook, all that good 21st century stuff, please put this on your stuff. Let your friends and neighbors through the internet know about what we're doing and try to win their votes. Another thing you can do to help. That's free. That's easy. Now, if you do have some money that you can throw into the back bucket back there, we aren't looking to raise $1 million, but it does cost money. And to do what we do, I'm not asking you to take food off your table by any stretch of the means, but if you can give me $5, $500, $2,500 is the most you can give me. Don't expect that tonight. But if there's something you can offer just to help out so we can pay for these next things, please pass it in the bucket, write a check, or go to the website and put it in. That helps too. And it takes that sacrifice from us all, whether it's time or money or whatever you've got. We're giving all we have. I guarantee you, my wife, my kids, some of the members on my team, you're looking at a couple of them back there, we are giving everything we have to make this possible. I don't need everything you have, but a little bit, like Jan and Caroline and Mike and Jeff back there the other days. If you can give me an afternoon, if you can give me $50, that little bit makes a huge difference when we put it all together moving forward and making this thing happen. So if you like what you've heard tonight, please sign up on the volunteer list, you know, pass the hat back there. Whatever you can do to help win these votes, to help this election, will be much, much appreciated. And you can be a part of history. Remember about this idea, living in California, replacing a liberal Democrat with a conservative Republican like myself. You can be a part of that history. You can help make this happen. You've seen the numbers. You've heard me speak. You know it can happen. You're not just expressing your opinion. You are making a difference. So please help me out. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'm going to wrap things up right now, and I'm going to answer your 2 questions back there, Dick. And I didn't get your name.
I'm Jerry.
Sherry, let me ask Dick, go with Dick first, and then you can go back there and talk.